Ms. Karima, are you there?
I'm still here, yes.
Yeah, fine. Maybe I just want to come to you because I know you are in the legal profession. Prof is talking about quite interesting things, and I believe you also, first and foremost, what you from Safaricom. So Safaricom is a critical national infrastructure with, you guys are working on connectivity issues. But there's one thing Prof has touched on, which is with regards to data localization. The data localization aspect, where we are seeing now regulations like, okay, now can we now ensure that the data within each and every country, for example, like Kenya, we now need to start localizing the data of our own citizens because of privacy issues. And if you look at it, for example, in the EU, for example, there's a EU GDPR. And you remember, for example, with Facebook, even themselves, they were fined in Europe because of data of European Union citizens. My question to you, Ms. Karim, is that what exactly is your understanding? And I know you are supposed to make a submission on that with regards to the legal jurisprudence in the African ecosystem as far as security and privacy is concerned. Back to you, Ms. Karim.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Gilbert. So basically, firstly, maybe a few comments about the legal framework as far as cybersecurity is concerned. So what we need in place in each country and in each space within Africa is proper laws and proper framework, because it's one thing to have a law, but we also need the institutional framework to be able to enforce the laws that have been put in place in order to protect the online space in which we operate. So this includes, as has been touched by many other people, data protection laws. We also need a robust cybercrimes law, and we also need laws that protect e-transactions across the board of whichever form or nature, including financial transactions. So these are things that need to be put in place in each country in which you require the kind of protection over your citizenry on the online space. So in Africa, and a reference has been made to the UNTACT page, there's actually some statistics that have been put in place as of about 2 months ago in April that shows, as far as data protection legislation is concerned, 27 of the 54 countries have data protection laws in place. 9 of them have them in draft format and are considering this, whereas the remaining ones, either there's no data available or they don't actually have any data protection laws. When we talk about cyber crimes, now we have 39 of the African countries with cyber crimes laws in place, 2 of them in draft form and the rest no data or no legislation in place or no protection. When we talk about electronic transactions, again, there's a little bit more than data protection. They say 33 countries actually have the legislation that's required to be in place. Now, having said that, some of this legislation was put in place a long time ago. Even if we were to talk about, for example, Kenya, when you talk about e-transactions, there was a move to have an e-transactions bill that did not happen, and instead we had e-transaction legislation that was put in place a little, I think about 10 years ago in 2010. So you find that there is need to update and bring this legislation to be able to cater for the times in which we live. Data protection is particularly important because, among other things, there is need for oversight over data protection as well as cybersecurity. It's important for ensuring cybersecurity is in place, because we will then have an institutional framework to have a data protection authority that has oversight, so that now anyone who collects people's personal data, and this is where the vulnerabilities exists, will not be a law unto themselves. They will be answerable to someone else. So in Kenya, for example, we put in our data protection law late last year, and we have the Data Protection Authority, who is envisioned as a data commissioner. And currently, as we speak, there is an ongoing process for the recruitment of our first ever data commissioner, who should be in place shortly in Kenya. So that's the first thing that I would wish to comment about as far as that is concerned. Now, a challenge which the Prof has actually made reference to is the fact that every jurisdiction does its laws autonomously. So there's no uniformity in the kind of law that you will be subjected to. So you will find that Kenya might put a data protection that says X, and then its neighbor, Uganda or Tanzania or Rwanda, puts in different provisions as far as that is concerned. So if you want to come in as, let's say, somebody who wants to invest within Africa, or somebody who wants to even expand within the region, the predictability of the environment in which you operate comes in as a challenge, because we don't have harmonized laws as far as Kenya is concerned, or as far as Africa is concerned. So Europe is a very good example of harmonized laws, and that's one of the things which we as Africa ought to start figuring out. How can we make this work for us? Because having smaller blocks, and Africa countries can tend to also be quite small, it would actually help in terms of even having and increasing our competitiveness and our ability to even negotiate with other people across the board, if we are not coming in as one country, but you're coming in as a block. So as far as that is concerned, as Prof has again alluded to, there's many regional bodies that exist. So first and foremost, we have the AU that exists across the board. And the AU does come up with model laws sometimes, such as if you think about as far as data protection is concerned and cybersecurity, the AU in 2014 put in a convention on cybersecurity and personal data protection. So this was adopted in 2014. Again, it will probably need to be revised by now. But again, what's the force of that law within each member state within the AU? Now, if we were to talk about other bodies, West Africa, there is ECOWAS. South Africa, there is SADC. There is also COMESA. And we also have, for us specifically in East Africa, EAC. So how can we also leverage on these bodies to be able to have uniform laws and policies? Now, as far as that is concerned, I'd also mention that there has been a move to have a single digital market in East Africa that involves the 6 East African countries. So this move has been advocated by the World Bank, as well as it's one of the things that falls in under the manifesto of Smart Africa. And the idea is to have a single digital economy where you have harmonized laws and you have harmonized provisions across the board. So you think of it as a single digital market with uniform digital identities, digital payments, e-transactions. All these will be uniform across the board. We'll have, in terms of institutional frameworks, similar data protection laws and cybersecurity laws and content regulation. And again, the infrastructure and the services that will support this also needs to be harmonized so that it's something that everyone across each market is able to predict. And even us as East Africa, we're able then now to figure ourselves out if there are any barriers, trade barriers that prevent us. Now we need to think about collapsing these trade barriers so that East Africa becomes a more logical block for everyone across the board. So our role again as the Law Society is in helping shaping the environment and ensuring that even as we think about moving and making an environment where laws, cybersecurity, data protection is supported, how are we helping shape that environment? Now onwards to Prof's question, he asked a specific question about, or rather he raised an issue around data localization, which is also a challenge. Data localization essentially is, we are in saying that we want our data to be kept in country. We don't want our data to be removed from Kenya, or we don't want our data to be removed from Rwanda, which I know it sounds like something that's good and for the benefit of the people of Kenya or the people of Rwanda or whichever country we're speaking about, because it gives you a sense of autonomy. It gives you a sense of, our data will not be exploited by others. But practically it doesn't happen. We don't have the infrastructure that we are able to, keep our data in-house at an economic cost in terms of even in how we protect the data. If you think about the kind of sophistication, like for example, a cloud that exists, if we were to talk about clouds like AWS, Microsoft clouds, I'm just talking about 2 of them across the board. in order to replicate that kind of protection in Africa and in your country, it might not always work. So I think data localization, although it sounds like a good idea, it cannot be applied across the board. I think as a principle, there needs to be elements that allow for cross-border data transfers in order for you to be able to, compete competitively. Then remember, it also cuts both ways. If I can't let my data go out of the country, anyone will also hesitate to bring their data into your country because there is no free flow of data. So you also cease to become an an attractive investment destination. No one wants to put or host a data center in such a place. So what we need to concentrate more, other than that, is ensure you have proper laws that protect that kind of data, proper cyber laws that ensure if there is any kind of breach, for example, that whoever is responsible for those breaches is actually held to account. So that should actually be the bigger concentration, other than be preoccupied with having our information remain local. So that would be what my submission is as far as that is concerned. So have I missed out anything else that perhaps the Prof would have said that you wish for me to comment about?
No, I think you've covered quite a good aspect of it, Prof. But I just hold on to that thought. And, it's quite interesting. Yes, we talk about data localization, but there are those who are even using a different term called data colonization, colonialism in one way or the other. But just hold on to that. I will come to you, back to you, Ms. Karimi. I want you just to think about that angle called data colonialism. And I'll explain further when I get, but let me get to Stella so that she doesn't get bored in there. Stella, what exactly is your take on maybe what Ms. Karimi is saying? I mean, I know you're young in this piece, you're getting into cybersecurity, but I mean, you're the next generation. We call the next gen. So what's your take? You're the digital generation, so your data is very important to us, and let's know what you say. Go ahead. The floor is yours.
Actually, when Ms. Karimi was talking, I was wondering, is it possible to include person with technical skills to also become, a lawyer? Because I believe all these policies and, and all these frameworks and plans do have a role, and they'll actually, materialize with time. But there are some aspects that get lost. For example, cybersecurity is extremely wide. And when it comes to the space of forensics, for example, in crime committed, done using nowadays, most cases, I believe, have a digital, evidence to it, a phone, a laptop, maybe a router was used in the crime because of Wi-Fi and the likes. How prepared are we? How robust is the system to handle such? So my comment is, actually, I think that other than us being so technical and fixing stuff and securing stuff, I believe we should also intentionally seek to become legal practitioners with the knowledge of the technical side. That's what I think should happen.
Okay. It's an interesting conversation you brought, and I think I'll balance it back. I'll push it back again to, of course, Prof, I'll come to you, but I want to push it back to you, Ms. Karimi, from the legal, because you're also representing the legal society of Kenya, right? Is it right? Did I get it right? Ms. Karimi, are you there?
Yes, you did.
Yes.
Are you not able to hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you. So I wanted to ask you a question, just speaking on what Stella has said.
Yes.
That there's that lapse between the legality and the practice of the law as it is, what you guys call jurisprudence, and also with regards to the technicality, more so in the world where we are now in cybercrime, where, for example, let's say there's a case being tried in court, and the judge has no understanding of the legality, of the technicality of, let's say, the aspect, let's say, with regards to data acquisition, because when you talk about forensics, there's a total whole chain of custody, and a case ends up maybe being dismissed by a judge, just maybe because the judge doesn't understand the technicality. Maybe does it mean now, maybe from the Law Society of Kenya as well, is it time to retrain our judges to the digital age? Back to you, Ms. Karim.
Yes, so Stella raises a very valid point around you can't just be a lawyer who sticks to the law and expect to to legislate over issues that you don't fully understand. So to some extent, being a tech lawyer or being a tech policy person requires that you understand, you have a fairly good understanding of the tech space. So you might not be a techie or a cybersecurity expert, but if you don't have an understanding of what it is that you need to take care of, then you end up in a situation where some things get lost in translation. So that I totally agree. So there is need for even lawyers never to think about themselves of, I have learned the law and this is where it ends. Just the same way that if I was in the financial space, I need to understand exactly what the financial sector is about. What are the players or what are the important, elements that you need to have in place so that even if you are passing legislation or if you are representing a client, as far as that is concerned, you have a fairly good understanding of it. So again, yes, it's an area which it's a bit of a niche area, and our judiciary might not be fully. I know there are some very tech savvy and very progressive judges that we have, for example, in Kenya, but across the board, because you see, you have no control, especially if tech law has not been taken as a specific area where we have a specific tech law or tech court. You have no control over which judge receives your matter. So you might end up getting, yes, one of the progressive judges, or you might end up getting one who maybe might not have a full understanding of technical issues. So capacity building becomes an important aspect. It's a very important aspect. And we must have the principle of no man left behind. Okay, when I say man, I mean no man or woman left behind. As in everyone needs to be on board. Because if we have very good laws, if we have very good practitioners, and again, our judges, for example, are not left there or are not on the same page as us, then that becomes a weak link. And on that same very note, and I know this is not necessarily a purview for us as the lawyer or the legal fraternity, it's a responsibility for all of us, the citizenry, because I think one of the weakest links is the human factor. As long as people don't fully understand this, we all have an important role in ensuring that everyone across the board has a fairly good understanding of what they need to do from their end to protect themselves. I mean, it's very sad when you start seeing people falling for very simple, cybersecurity attacks, which could have been done away with just simple awareness as far as that is concerned. So again, that becomes an important element of educating not just our judges, not just the legal fraternity, but even our clients, because it's not so well to have them always, coming and saying this and this happened to me if it's something that was avoidable through just educating them.
Now, it's quite interesting, Karimi, what you've said, and I think I totally agree. It's time to innovate or die. It's time for the legal fraternity as well to also adapt the reality that the world has changed. We are now digital. As much as you call yourself the learned friends, maybe it's time to join the other side as well. And but it's a quite interesting conversation. But holding on to what we've just said, I know, Prof, you work a lot into development, and that's an area. Now, maybe I want to ask you on this, touching on the same point of conversation, picking from Ms. Karimi, what exactly, if you working in the development arena with other countries, I know you work a lot with maybe, let's say, the African Union, whatever, all these institutions. The question comes in, what role is there for the development partners? And if it is there, is it always just there to champion their own agenda?
That's really a hardball question, actually. Yes. In terms of, yes. Let me actually go back a little bit to the histories. Okay, of ICT for development. We actually had a really big peak of development partners actually supporting ICT for development in the end of actually 20th century to probably Stella was not even born there to around 2005. That's when we actually had so-called WISES, World Summit on Information Society, and there was a lot of interest in terms of utilizing ICT for development. That is where the African Union and also the the African Economic Commission for Africa also really launched, how ICT could be capitalized within development of African continent. But that sort of died down. So, and then now we are really starting resurgence of so-called digital transformation. Probably people have heard of it. And there's a lot of actually donors actually getting into this area again. Having a long time sort of ICT 4D practitioners, I'm being a little bit actually cautious about this because, we actually had a lot of hype in terms of ICT 4D in around 2003 to 2005. And then people sort of, but, we have other priorities, we do something else. Now, hopefully this time is different. But this is something like practitioners like us basically have to be very mindful. Really, ICT or digital transformation, digital technology is not a panacea, right? This is just a tool. So we have to be very, very careful in terms of how we're going to utilize these tools appropriately. We not necessarily think that, the fastest and biggest technology is appropriate in the context of, where we are. Of course, if that particular technology is useful, yes, we should actually use it. But it doesn't necessarily mean that, the latest and the highest and most expensive technology actually is useful in that particular thing. And the technology keep evolving anyway, right? So we should never, ever lock down into particular technologies. We should be always open to that, new technologies coming, new innovation comes in. I think this is one thing I think as a recipient of the donor aid to be mindful. And also, yes, you're putting a very, very touchy subject, yes. Many actually development organizations do actually have the agenda behind it. yes, that's undeniable, yes. But at the same time, I think this is really where the recipient countries, the supported countries also be quite tactical about this. It is really a negotiation process. I think you need to actually come up with win-win situations, right? so that's something that actually both sides is being very, very mindful of that in order to receive the support.
Prof, I know. I don't want to push you too much. I know you want to sound politically correct. It's fine. And look,
I worked for the UN for a long time, so
absolutely. So now look, and Ms. Karimi maybe also join in shortly. But there's always a question. There's a conversation I had, or there's a story is always being told, and there was this consultant at the World Bank, and he said, a consultant at the World Bank said, when I go to Africa, it's always not the same as when I go to Europe or Eastern Asia. Because when I go with a project of the World Bank to them in Eastern Asia or the other countries, they have a look at the program. Remember, in Africa, we had the structural adjustment program in the early 90s, where people were being told, government for us revenue, and the structural adjustment program never worked, and it was a failed policy, of course, of the development partners. But the question comes in that maybe are we trying to realize that maybe Africa, I don't know where Stella has gone to, but Africa, does it mean maybe with regards to Africa, the policymakers, maybe, yes, as you say very well, development partners have their own agenda, and it's fine. Everybody has their own agenda. Is it that maybe this means that us as Africans, maybe sometimes we don't even read this document?
Okay.
Hold into that thought. Let me bring Ms. Karimi on. Hold on to my question.
Okay.
Let me bring Ms. Karimi on. Ms. Karimi, what do you have to say with regards to the development partner as far as their agenda is concerned?
So, well, everyone has an agenda. That's the truth. And how you always have to make it work is you have to find what's in it for you. So look at it, what's in it for them, what's in it for you, and try and find middle ground. Unfortunately for us as Kenyans, it's what's in it for the development partner, and then what's in it for the policy maker, which not always is aligned with what's in it for the citizen. So I think there's a lot more requirement to hold our policies makers into account, because they don't always make decisions. They may make short-term decisions that have a long-term implication, which if thought out better, they would have looked at it in terms of prosperity for what's in the interest of my citizens, what's in the interest of the normal consumer. So that, I think, is where our gap is. And part of the issue also has to do with the inability to, I guess, to get the kind of critical mass that can question policymakers at this level. This is usually left to the purview of a few people who are usually seen as the civil society and who are usually treated as a nuisance factor by our policy makers, because our citizens are not actually making as much noise about some of these things as they ought to. So that is, I think, where the issue is. Because you see, if it's an informed citizen that's coming and saying, this is what we require from you as the development partner, really, they need something. Look at it. What's in it? Give a little, take a little. They will end up giving a little of what you want.
Absolutely. I agree absolutely. As we land in almost closing, Stella, what do you have to say? I don't know whether you're working with development partners as well. I know you're in Shihats. Maybe you guys are getting money from this development. What's the agenda? Are you guys getting a good share of your?
She joined a consulting company for about 6 months within InfoSec. She was a technology.
Sorry, I think there's some video playing. Sorry.
She joined a consulting company for about 6 months within InfoSec.
Sorry, guys, I think there's something playing.
She was a technology consultant.
The technical team, could you stop that?
And afterwards, basically, point 3 kept wanting to be like, hey, come join us. So.
Sorry for the distraction. I think it was playing on the background. My question was to Stella. What do you have to add with regards to that? With regards to the aspect of development, I know you guys are doing an amazing work, but the question comes in: what is in it for you? Yes.
Very, very, very good question. Okay, as I've mentioned, you've had several partners who have been there for us with different capacities in terms of resources. And what I can say when it comes to development, we're going one step at a time. Because as we speak, we have other interests to go into the younger generation, literally the young people, the kids. Yeah, we want to teach them a lot so that as they get groomed into the cyberspace, they already have the background knowledge of of tech. I believe with time, because I'm seeing like Ms. Karimi said, I'm also seeing a very huge niche in the advocacy and development space, because I also believe that cybersecurity, it's a revolution. We started with the oil revolution, with economies turning to agriculture, and then now turning to all sorts of things. And I believe every aspect, every discipline, one day will have to have a cybersecurity agent, and I believe that's what I think. I hope you're hearing me, because I can see my internet is misbehaving.
No, I can hear you, and we are almost coming to bring the ship to landing. And as I land, I just want to pass to you guys one more time. And my question, of course, I will also get all you give me your last word on it. And there's a question coming from the public, is about data colonization. Ms. Karimi talked about it, and for sure, you also talked about it, Prof. The infrastructure in Africa might not be to the level of the Western world. We don't expect, for sure, we don't have the AWS. I mean, and even from the practicality of a user, if I have a VPS server to be able to connect in Europe, and it's much faster because the infrastructure there is quite perfect. As it is now, we're having a conference, but the servers are not hosted in Africa. That's a fact. Now the question comes in, and this one also I think should be answered now by Ms. Karimi. They are a telecommunication, one of the most profitable, of course, in Eastern Central Africa. I mean, the question of infrastructure and also reducing the cost of data to also bring more innovation. What exactly are they doing in that part? Or is just about, it should be profitability, but there should be also the sense of people feeling there's the sense of also promotion of development, because the issue has always been depending more on the development partners, the so-called non-governmental organization, and without to make any respect, I always refer to non-governmental organizations as nothing going on, with all due respect to them. It's an alignment. So the question is, maybe the private sector as well now has a big role to play here. And Ms. Karimi, maybe Prof, what do you think about that? I'll come to that. With regards to data colonialism, people feel like, for sure, and I'll bring this on one angle. There has been an issue, because remember we're in advocacy. There was an issue in Kenya during the elections, I think in last elections, where I think one lawyer, and I hope Ms. Karimi is listening, made a submission that the data centers are in Europe, and the legal team cannot be able to access those servers. So it became quite interesting. So it means at this point where we are in is that the data being localized in a foreign country can end up being utilized for another country's own interest. What do you guys think about that? That's data colonization. I mean, data is the new gold. So maybe let me bring in Prof, and you guys just in a closing round, what exactly do you guys think with regards to data being in another foreign land and also being used as an arsenal of war or whatever the case?
Thank you, Gilbert. As a closing remark, I think that's a huge topic. That itself can last like so many hours of discussions. But yes, actually, data colonization, yes, that's a big issue. As you mentioned correctly, data is the next gold. Data is where the money is. It's not a physical gold or a physical. I think data is really the money or the wealth is going to be for the next generations to come. So yes, is it safe actually to bring all this data abroad? Probably not. Yes, but at the same time, I think we should be practical about this. How can you actually maybe we don't actually have the computing power necessary to do the transactions, yes? But we can actually separate this transactional data to the individual data, for example. That's one way. You basically have all this individualized data secured within your jurisdictions, and then actually have transactions be done abroad. Now, of course, in time, we would love to see the platform to be developed in Africa. So we don't have to rely on these fiber optical cable lines to go and do all the data transactions abroad. It doesn't make sense. But practically, for now, that might be a solution. Now, another thing I think is really necessary is encryption. Yes, we really should encrypt all this critical data. Yes, of course, people said all the encryption data can be hacked and they can be decrypted. But at the same time, why don't we make sure that we make it more difficult for anyone to actually do that? So I really think that we should actually have the common sort of the encryption regime. And this is also going back to the advocacy as well. Advocacy is very important. If I think Karimi was mentioning about, simple act should actually, prevent a lot of actually cyber crimes, cyber incidents happening. One thing is encryption. If you are mindful and if everybody said, okay, we're going to encrypt all these critical data and then perhaps do the transactions, even if you actually have the citizen data in like Amazon server somewhere in Ireland, say, if you're going to have a really strong encryption, it's going to be incredibly difficult for anyone to actually decrypt that data. So that's interim solutions. Probably that's also something that we should think about. But in the in the long term, I really think the platform business should actually come out from Africa. That's where really the money is. Platform, not just a service, it's a product. It's a platform, and that is unfortunately it is basically in the developed countries now. But in time, I think we're going to actually have that. But also, can I just for the last word, I think I would like to add on support infrastructures and supporting personnel. Stella and Karimi mentions about legal professions, tech-savvy legal, professions. But we really need tech-savvy for everyone, right? Tech-savvy accountants, tech-savvy, even like a pizza delivery person. We really need to actually have this, ICT or digital sort of ecosystem to be catered by different actually, professions who understand the needs of the sector and who understand how can you actually leverage this digital transformation. So back to you, Gilbert. I don't know if I answered.
No, you answered the question, and I think for this time for us to close, I bring in Ms. Karimi to add into the conversation and what she has to say.
Yes, so firstly, I wish to agree entirely with what Prof has said as far as that is concerned. So the whole idea of data colonization particularly came about after the Snowden incident, because now it came into focus that what are people using this data, what are people using our data for? And there was a lot of paranoia across the board about foreign jurisdictions misusing your information. So again, now arising from the whole aspect of data colonization comes in the aspect of data sovereignty. But I believe that data sovereignty and data localization are not actually the same thing. You can still ensure there is autonomy over your data without insisting that it can only be autonomous if kept within your country. So that's one thing that we must always be alive to. If you think about GDPR, GDPR is all about autonomy, but not necessarily about localization. So it doesn't matter where the citizen's information is being processed. The person is still being held to account, regardless of the area of processing that information. So that's the kind of thing that we should be thinking about, because we live in a global world. It's impossible for you to think in this new global world that I'll be able to hive off and create a fence around my data. It's not going to work. It's not going to work for us as each of these jurisdictions. Now, if you think about the incident in Kenya and the aspect around the elections, I think there was a very traditional view of how is it the servers are locked. It's almost like someone viewed the server as a place with a padlock. And if you think about it, it's actually better in a cloud because it's accessible 24/7. But now you see, because they were able to, I think, confuse issues, everyone sort of looked at it like, as long as it's in France and the server is not there, one of those kind of things. But frankly and practically speaking, this ought to have been taken care of by simple contract law. And of course, the necessary legislative framework. That data should be accessible. It should not have been a question of that. As in, that's something that now if you see this is where the weaknesses are, can be able to concentrate on and see how is it that we are able to adequately ensure that we have the autonomy and the sovereignty over the data that matters to us. Now, specifically, if you look at us from a Kenyan perspective, even in terms of cross-border data transfers, it's not across the board. So again, they have hived off that some information cannot go out, because there's still that, I guess, there's that feeling within us and policymakers that there's that fear that we might lose the autonomy of it. But I think it's important to still create avenues that allow for it, either through ensuring and demonstrating to the Data Protection Authority that the country to which you're taking your data has adequate laws to continue and ensure the protection of that information when it gets across to the other side. So I still feel that yes, so colonization is a challenge, but we need to be vigilant and, of course, not let your data go out to jurisdictions that have no protection, but at the same time, not be too closed in about how we see and how we think that our data will be protected. Last comment I'll give as far as the whole sovereignty issue is concerned and localization. If you think about it, if, for example, we knew that the election data was being hosted by a server in Kenya, let's say it's being hosted by a server in Kenya on Mombasa Road, that is actually a bigger vulnerability, because guys are going to go physically to the location and burn it down. So again, it's a double-edged sword. The fact that the data is located in Kenya doesn't necessarily mean it was going to be safer. So those are things that we also need to think about, because yes, we learn from the past, but if we were to look into the future, we need to think about it from a very dynamic and a very, how best are we going to protect our data and at the same time ensure that it's not exploited by others and it serves us. That is what my submission would be as far as that is concerned. for my parting shot, because I guess that's not necessarily, this is the last time I'm going to perhaps talk, I'll just say, as far as the parting shot is concerned, yes, it's important to have laws and legislation in place, but the biggest factor that we need to take care of is the human factor. So across the board, awareness of every person, starting with policy makers, actually becomes the responsibilities of us as practitioners across the board. So even as Arthur had asked, yes, even techies can learn the law so that they can ensure that they are able to better feed into the process, and they don't leave just the lawmaking process to someone who might not be able to understand it. So it's not a room for one person who is looking at, I'm sticking to my discipline. You have to be multiple disciplined, you have to be a lawyer, you have to be a technician, an engineer, you have to be look at it across the board and understand these issues in a manner where when you're able to speak about something, you're able to feed and add value to it in a more meaningful manner. Yes, so that I guess will be my parting shot. Thank you.
Wow, that's a wonderful submission. Human factor is very important. I think we all agree. I mean, as Ms. Karimi has made a submission. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we're coming to landing of the boat. It's been an interesting almost 1 hour, 30 minutes of engagement. Stella, unless you have anything to say, you have anything to say? Okay,
yeah,
fine.
just like
Make your parting shot.
Yes, thank you very much, Gilbert. I'd like to give the audience a small assignment, because as she says, the human element really matters, and also the awareness of this conversation. I believe, and research has shown, slowly data is becoming more valuable than oil. And there's so much you can say about it, but there's a documentary that was done, and also you mentioned it showed the impact of how data is used to profile so that businesses can come and do their thing. I'd like every person, if possible, to go and watch a documentary called The Great Hack. It will really bring and shed light in this conversation so that people understand how they can play their own role in all of this. So, but thank you very much, Gilbert. This has been amazing. You guys have done yourselves as a forum, as an admin, and congratulations, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much. Much appreciated, and keep doing the good work. Prof, do you want to close so that at least I close the podium? You want to say something?
No, yeah, actually, thank you very much. This was actually a very, very informative and interesting discussions. I hope we had more time actually to discuss. I think some of the audience actually mentioned about that we need to make sure that data is not only just personal data. Data is a wealth for the continent, and I completely agree with that comment. I think what I meant was basically we need to make sure that in the case of I don't know if you remember Uchumi actually selling the customer's data to Unilever because they could not actually analyze the customer's data in Kenya. Now I think the situation is changing, but really we need to actually have the capacity basically to say, okay, what are you going to use this particular data that we have? Not just selling that. We have to have our own agenda in the continent saying how are we going to leverage this data and utilize the data for the continent's good. And then, raw data processing or keeping these raw data outside, that's really not matter. So long as we actually have this agenda, so what are we going to do with this particular data that is our asset, our actual richness, and then how we're going to really utilize this for our own good. So I think that is really something that we need to think about that time.
Yeah. No, thank you guys. I mean, you've been an amazing team of speakers, panelists, well researched, well versed. I just want to say thank you once again to Professor Atsushi. Thank you to Stella, and thank you to you, Ms. Karimi. Thank you so much. I think she's gone. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
So thank you,
Gilbert. So much. Pleasure having you all.
I'm still here. Thank you very much. Thank you to my fellow panelists and you.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Karimi. Thank you, Stella.